The 2026 NBA playoffs have arrived, and I want to give my prediction/analysis for every first round matchup. Now, normally I would do a couple of different fully dedicated series previews, but frankly, this year's first round is not as interesting as I originally anticipated. Minnesota versus Denver is the only series that I expect to be genuinely awesome. It's not impossible that that's not the case, but usually I would do a couple of breakdowns. This one, I'm just going to give you my rapid fire predictions, and most of the matchups from here on will get their own individual video, but I don't want to do a whole full-scale prediction in this case. I like to see what we see in the first round before I make any hardline stances about what happens in the rounds that follow. All of that said, for the first matchup that is easily the most interesting, at least to me, Denver versus Minnesota, I did a full series breakdown for that one in particular because it should be the most interesting, because it should probably be the closest one. So go check that out if you have not already. I'm very proud of the depth of analysis that I pulled off in that one. I spent probably a inefficient, in terms of business sense, time on that video, but I am very happy with the product, so it's worth it in my book. The short and sweet version of it is I think that Denver will win in 6 because a lot of the things that resulted in Minnesota winning in 2024 have changed in the case of Denver and in the case of Minnesota. I think the cat factor instead of Randall hurts Minnesota in this particular matchup. Aaron Gordon's three-point shot developing, Denver having a shitload more depth so that their 7th man isn't Justin Holiday. I think the Nuggets are just better prepared for this matchup than they were in 2024. Staying in the Western Conference for OKC versus Phoenix. Phoenix is a hard-nosed defensive team. I could see OKC having troubles with that, but the offensive firepower of the Suns is just not going to be good enough to really make it all that interesting. I'm sure that Dylan Brooks and SGA will have some moment, but other than that, I don't think that much will come of this series. I think OKC either wins in a sweep or a gentleman's sweep. Pistons versus Magic, that's a sweep. Literally, Orlando might score 80 points per game on average in that series. That's a devastating sweep. I think that's the most surefire sweep you could possibly ask for. Next, we have Lakers versus Rockets. I also did a video about this series that was a lot more loose, talking about the Lakers versus Rockets matchup, and specifically like the LeBron factor in that matchup, how Luka being in or out might affect it. Not an in-depth analysis, but that is over on Little Rusty Buckets, or at least it should be pretty soon thereafter this one goes up. But the short and sweet of that, basically, if Luka is not back by like game 3, it's probably over. There's a chance that LeBron and the Lakers manage to get a win without those guys, and if that is the case, that might lead to the Lakers winning, again, if Luka is able to come back soon enough. Theoretically, if Luka were to come back in game 4 and the Lakers are down 2-1 at that point, I again think that they could make something happen. But Houston, as bad as a lot of the vibes are with that team, as up and down as they've been, as bad as they have been in the clutch, they are a top 10 offense and defense, and the Lakers are only top 10 in one of those categories, and that is with Luka fucking Doncic, who will miss extended time, not to mention Austin Reeves missing extended time. So I think Houston probably wins that series in 5 or 6. And if Luka does not play at all, 4-5. Gentleman sweep or regular sweep. Spurs versus Trailblazers. The thing about the Trailblazers is they're really just perfectly mid. Like, they're a fairly mid offense. They're a fairly mid defense. I think they're a lower mid offense. Like, I think they're like 20th or something like that, which is not great, but they're also not terrible by any stretch. And the Spurs are an excellent defense, and they are literally the best defense in the league when Wemby is on the floor, and one of the better offenses in the league when Wemby is on the floor. So this should really just be a warm-up series for the Spurs. Not to mention, I think that Denny, when he is loaded up on in the playoff setting, when there is going to be just way more defensive pressure, he's not going to be out here putting up like 40-point triple-doubles. Moving on to the Eastern Conference, I think Celtics versus Sixers could be interesting if Joel Embiid is playing, and we don't really know what his timeline is. That's been left very ambiguous from what I have been able to find, so not sure. It seems unlikely that he is going to be at least substantially impactful in this series, whether he comes in a few games late. I think it's possible that Tyrese Maxey or VJ Edgecombe just have some really big performances, and if those really big performances cross over, they could get get a game in there. But presuming that Embiid at least is not going to be there for the first half of the series, they're probably going to go down in a deficit, and I don't think they'll come back from it. If Joel Embiid was fully healthy, I actually think that could be an awesome series. But there is, yeah, it was hard to say that would happen right now. It's Joel Embiid is so unlucky. I feel so bad for Joel Embiid, but that's neither here nor there. So yeah, Celtics probably in 5 or 6, maybe 7 if Joel Embiid is somewhat available and somewhat himself when he is available, but I don't know. Doesn't seem like that's going to happen. Knicks versus Hawks. Now, this is probably, it depends. Either this or the 1-8 matchup will be the most interesting one in the Eastern Conference this year. The Hawks surged at the end of the year, and I will be forthright here because I don't want to be misleading or overconfident. I haven't watched probably as much late season hoops specifically for the Atlanta Hawks as I should to fully evaluate them. That's said, I do know what the Hawks look like at their best because they've had stretches where they looked awesome earlier on in the season. Obviously, there's the post-Trae Young trade factor, CJ McCollum being a starting guard on that team, but I do think that ultimately the Knicks are a little bit more talented. I don't know that they're that much better coached, but I feel a little bit better about their coaching, I suppose. And the Hawks are also very green. You know, Jalen Johnson has never been a number 1 guy in a playoff setting. Nickeil Alexander-Walker has never had such a significant offensive role in a playoff setting. And we have seen with him in the past in a far reduced offensive role, him really shrinking offensively, that is, in a playoff setting. So I'm going to bank on the Knicks, who I have seen have some really significant dogfight playoff series over the last couple of years. They also have easily the best player in the series. They have easily the best second option in the series. Although I guess it's not that easily because Cat's been kind of bad this year. But presuming that bounce back is to occur somewhat in the playoffs, I don't think the Hawks have much of a shot if that does. But the Knicks are also a team that I feel uncomfortable betting heavily on. So this could absolutely be a 7-game series. It would not surprise me whatsoever. But if I have to make a prediction, I'm going to go Knicks in 6. Cleveland versus Toronto. This is another matchup where if I had to presume, I think people would be a little bit disrespectful and disingenuous or dismissive, if you want some 3Ds there. Toronto is a pretty good NBA team. There's a reason that they are the 5th seed. They're a very good defense, and their offense, while it's not good, it is less prone to massive fluctuations because they take care of the ball really, really well. They are a generally pretty good assist team, I believe. At least earlier on in the year, they were one of the top 5 teams in assists. Yeah, they are 3rd in assists per game while being 23rd in turnovers, which puts them in a similar company to like the Denver Nuggets in terms of the playmaking ability of that team. So they are good at taking care of the ball, which is a good way to like be more consistent. It's one of those things where you don't beat yourself. The Toronto Raptors don't beat themselves very often, but there are still a lot of offensive limitations with this team that are pretty damn significant by contrast to the Cleveland Cavaliers. Cleveland is one of the best shooting teams, both in terms of their literal stats, their literal percentage. Cleveland is 7th in attempts, and they are 13th in percentage, which is literally exactly league average. So it's not amazing percentage, I guess, but that's also really because of the high volume of pull-up shooting between Donovan Mitchell and James Harden. But they literally have 5 guys. One of them isn't a real rotation piece. So we'll say 4 guys who shoot 40+%. Jalen Tyson's at 44.5%. Harden's at 43.5% as a Cavalier. God damn, that's really good. Sam Merrill, 42. Max Strus, 40. We know Donovan Mitchell's a great 3-point shooter, even if he's at 36% this year. And then Keon Ellis hasn't shot the 3 amazing in the 29 games that he has played with Cleveland. However, before this year, he was a career 40+% 3-point shooter. So there's just so much shooting there. And then Toronto is not a very good 3-point shooting team. They are 21st in percentage and 25th in volume. They're taking 5 less threes per game than the average NBA team. So yeah, the shooting's bad. The shot creation isn't amazing. Scotty Barnes can be inconsistent in that area. RJ Barrett can be inconsistent in that area. Really, Brandon Ingram's the only guy who I trust to consistently be able to just go get a bucket when he wants in a half-court set. And the other guys, I don't necessarily trust. So I think because their defense is as good as it is, they will put up a pretty damn respectable fight, and the offense is solid, so it's not like they're going to suck so much at scoring that they can't realistically hold their opponent to less points than they score. But something that really hurts Toronto in this matchup is the double bigs, because Scotty Barnes, can he handle Evan Mobley? Absolutely, but Evan Mobley has such a big offensive role, and Scotty Barnes, he is at his best defensively as a roamer, as a free safety, and having to put more energy into the one-on-one matchup will take away that aspect of the defense. And the other factor, with the spacing being as problematic as it is, Scotty can't shoot, even though I give credit and I think it's underrated the value of the spacing of having a good float game. Jakob Poeltl's float game is not going to be enough to make up for the fact that he can't shoot. So like maybe you want to put Mamu out there, but then you're so small that you're just going to get dominated inside by the bigs. And then if it becomes like, okay, you're going to bring Mamu out there for the more spacing to go for a more offensive approach, well, then your defense is going to slip so much that it just becomes offense versus offense. And if that's the case, Cleveland's going to win. And the thing is, it's not as though Cleveland is a bad defense. They are 15th in defensive rating, and we have seen before that Mobley and Allen, when they are really at their best defensively, they can be dogs on that end. And Keon Ellis is now here. Jalen Tyson's a solid defender, really big wing. So I don't really think there's a way that Toronto can really come out on top here, but I do think that there is enough working for them that they can make this a real series and push Cleveland to 6 games. I would say it's more likely a gentleman's sweep than a 7-game series, but I also would not be that shocked if it ended up being a 7-game series. I'm high on the Cleveland Cavaliers going in this year. They are my tentative pick to come out of the East. I really don't like making hardline predictions about who's making it all the way until I see what they look like in a playoff setting. I'll have a more concrete pick for who comes out of the East once the first round has happened, but my gut right now is pro Cleveland, which, you know, my gut was pro Cleveland last year and it failed, but I think a lot of the problems with that roster have been solved. I think the James Harden addition is very big for this team. I think the fact that he is much larger, less injury prone than Darius Garland means he'll be available and less of a defensive liability. I'm well aware that Garland is not a good defender and that James Harden's not really a great defender, but James Harden is like 30, 40 pounds heavier, and he cannot be picked on just for being tiny. So yeah, Cleveland I feel good about, and Toronto I feel better about than I feel like most people do. So I think that series should be interesting, but no disrespect to Toronto, your half-court offense is just too rough for this to work. And just to blitz through all these predictions one final time, Rockets in 5 or 6 versus the Lakers, Denver in 6 versus Minnesota, Spurs in 4 or 5 versus Portland, Thunder versus Phoenix 4 or 5, Celtics versus Sixers, probably 5 or 6 in favor of Boston, Knicks in 6 versus Atlanta, 7 more likely than 5, Cleveland in 6 versus Toronto, Pistons in 6 versus the Charlotte Hornets, Detroit versus Orlando would be a sweep. So that would, for the second round, give us OKC versus Houston and Denver versus San Antonio in the West. Very excited. I really hope that ends up being the series and nothing interferes with that. Celtics versus Knicks round 2 rematch in the East is really fascinating. And I really feel like Detroit versus Cleveland could go either way. In the second round, 3 out of the 4 series, I think have game 7 potential. I think all of them have could go either way potential. And that is really interesting. That's really compelling. So I think in spite of the first round having so many kind of bland series, it will be made up for because the second round should be cinema. The conference finals should be cinema, whether it is Spurs, Nuggets going up against OKC in the conference finals, that should be awesome. And then whether it's Cleveland, New York, maybe Atlanta, Detroit, or Boston, whoever it is, any of those combination of teams that go to the conference finals, those should also be a good matchup. So yeah, I'm very excited for these playoffs. Be sure to tune in to both channels. I'll be doing like smaller little tangents related to the playoffs over on Little Rusty, and then the big stuff, series previews, reactions. You'll probably see more double uploads over here. But yeah, I think that's all I have to say. Peace.